Okay, so we are back with another episode, and we are going to be reading in Genesis 4 about Cain and Abel. Now, Adam knew Eve, his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain, and said, I have acquired a man from the Lord. Then she bore again, this time his brother Abel. Now, Abel was a keeper of sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. And in the process of time, it came to pass that Cain brought an offering of the fruit of the ground to the Lord. Abel also brought of the firstborn of his flock and of their fat. And the Lord respected Abel and his offering, but he did not respect Cain and his offering. And Cain was very angry, and his countenance fell. So the Lord said to Cain, Why are you angry? And why has your countenance fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin lies at the door, and its desire is for you, but you should rule over it. Now Cain talked with Abel his brother, and it came to pass, when they were in the field, that Cain rose up against Abel his brother and killed him. Then the Lord said to Cain, Where is Abel your brother? He said, I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper? And he said, What have you done? The voice of your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. So now you are cursed from the earth, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you till the ground, it shall no longer yield its strength to you. A fugitive and a vagabond you shall be on the earth. And Cain said to the Lord, My punishment is greater than I can bear. Surely you have driven me out this day from the face of the ground. I shall be hidden from your face. I shall be a fugitive and a vagabond on the earth, and it will happen that anyone who finds me will kill me. And the Lord said to him, Therefore, whoever kills Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. And the Lord set a mark on Cain, lest anyone finding him should kill him.
So what stood out to you?
Acquired.
Acquired?
I have acquired a man from the Lord.
It means with the help of.
Okay, with the help of.
So she has help from God. So she says, with the Lord's help, I have created a son. And she calls him Cain, which means Cain means acquired.
Okay.
So the same word there.
Okay.
So she's basically saying, with God's help, I have Cain. And she calls him Cain. He is acquired.
Okay.
Why is that odd to you?
Just a strange way to say that she had a child.
Yeah, it is, right?
Yeah. But I guess it's her way of saying she did this with God.
Yeah, with God's help. She gave birth.
She's like giving God glory.
Yeah. The way this was always explained to me was that she was upset with Adam because Adam had blamed her for the fall. You know how God comes and then Adam says, it was the woman you gave me.
Yeah.
And so they have like a strained relationship, and then that's why she's like, Adam didn't have anything to do with this. That's kind of what she's saying.
Yeah.
But I don't really see that. I don't really agree with that. You know?
Yeah.
But now that you were just reading it, I see that there's a lot of parallels between Adam, the previous story, which is the one where they eat the fruit, and this one.
Okay.
There's a lot of similarities. Like he says in the curses, like the curses are very similar. Okay, so it starts here where he says, God comes and he says, where's your brother Abel? He asked Cain that. But why does God need to ask Cain where his brother is?
He knows.
Isn't he God? He already knows, right? It's the same thing when God said, Adam, where are you? God already knew where Adam was, but he wasn't where he was supposed to be.
Right.
And this is the same question here. It's like it's like the same.
Right.
He's saying, where's Abel? And then Cain gives the same response as Adam did, as Eve did, and as the serpent did. It's like shifting blame. It's not my fault.
Right.
You know, he's just like, am I my brother's keeper? Like, how am I supposed to know where he is?
Right. Well, what did Adam say?
Adam said, yeah.
When God came looking for him.
He said, I was scared and I hid.
Right.
And then he's cursed. He says, you know, your brother's blood cries out from the ground to me. Now you are under a curse, and driven from the ground, which opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you work the ground, it will no longer yield its crops for you. So Adam was cursed to work, to have a harder time working the ground.
Right.
And Cain is cursed to never have fruit from the ground. It seems like to me it's saying it's never gonna yield its fruit again to you. So it's like more. It's like the same curse, but it's more. It's a greater, right? Greater punishment.
Mm-hmm.
And then he says, "My punishment is more than I can bear. Today you are driving me from the land." So he gets kicked out. So they got kicked out of the garden. He's getting even more kicked out. And I will be hidden from your presence. This is what he doesn't like. Says, I'm hidden from your presence. Just like Adam and Eve hid from God, from God's presence. I'll be a restless wanderer on the earth. Whoever finds me will kill me. Kind of odd that it was like a lot of things.
Similarities.
That were very similar.
Right.
Yeah. But let's get into what we were talking about before about Eve giving birth to Cain. Like, we were talking about this earlier today. That my hypothesis, this is just my idea here, is that God basically in the curse for Eve, or actually it's the curse for the serpent, God gives like this prophecy about the Messiah, right? That's what we think as Christians looking back at it. So we think it's like the first mention of basically what Jesus, where it says that I'll put enmity between you and the woman's seed. He'll crush your head and you'll bruise his heel. So it's kind of like this promise that even though I'm kicking you out, there's gonna be a way back in, and that way back in is gonna be one of your seed, Eve, is gonna crush the serpent.
Yeah.
The same serpent that you couldn't overcome, he will overcome. And that's obviously talking about Jesus.
Right. Do you think that Eve even knows what that means?
Oh, yeah.
You think she knows what that means? She thinks, okay, I messed up, and it's the serpent's fault. And so now God is promising me that.
I think so.
You think so?
I think so because of this story.
Okay.
Because I think that she gives birth and she says, with God's help, I have made a boy. And so I think her hope is, this is the promised crusher of the serpent.
Well, and when God tells us something, we always think it's sooner than it is.
Yeah, for sure.
And so does everyone else in the Bible.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So I think she's like saying like, this is it. Like
Yeah.
we're gonna go back into the garden.
Right.
This is my son Cain, who I have acquired. He's an acquirer. This is the person that's gonna get us back in. Okay, so what further proves the point to me is that Cain is the initiator of the first ever sacrifice to God. And then Abel just seems to tag along. And there's a rabbinic tradition that says that this is taking place right outside the Garden of Eden. Like, they're literally like bringing the sacrifice right in front of the flaming sword, And so I think that Cain believes, this is just my thought, right? She gives birth, she says, this is the son of promise. He's going to crush the serpent. And so Cain has this belief in himself that he's going to do this. So he brings his sacrifice to God, but then God doesn't accept his sacrifice. He accepts his brother's sacrifice. Then that brings to the question, like, why does God not accept Cain's sacrifice? Why does he like Abel's sacrifice? There's a lot of ideas floating around there. But our idea today that we were talking about this, that I liked, was that Cain is sacrificing basically fruits and vegetables, right? And so the fruits and vegetables, they are the product of him working the ground. When they were in the garden, Adam's job was to work the garden, and then he gets kicked out, and his job outside while he got kicked out is to work the ground. And so Cain is bringing the fruits of him working the ground. To me, Cain is saying, look, God, I took my father's calling, and look at what I've done. Look at all these great works that I've made. And he is showing off to God how good he is at working the ground, to try and get God to say, oh, this is the best person for the job to work the garden, right? So he's showing off,
Right.
and he's got, to me, it seems like boastful and proud and saying, look at what I can do. Whereas Abel is bringing the sacrifice of a dead animal. And obviously this is only the second story basically. So the only other time that we've seen a dead animal is when God kills an animal to clothe them. And I think that that's where the answer is. Adam and Eve saw their own nakedness and they were ashamed. So what they did to cover their shame was they went and they grabbed leaves. Remember, they worked the ground, so they're about agriculture. So they went and they grabbed
Right.
basically their own works
Right.
to cover themselves.
Right.
But God comes and he says, no, this takes more than just your work to cover your shame. Your work is not nearly enough to cover your shame. So I will have to kill an animal, and the shedding of the blood of that animal is what is actually going to cover your shame.
Wow.
And so then Abel is saying, God, I might not understand what you were doing in the garden, but I know the story from what my parents told me, and they said that you clothed their shame with an animal. So here I bring the only thing that I know that will cover my shame, which is a dead animal. There's the same contrast again. Cain is bringing the works of his own hands.
Right.
When Abel is saying, I have seen, I have learned, I have taken time to sit and understand God. And even though I might not know everything, I know what my parents told me. And this is what I bring. Because to get back into the garden, I understand that I have to undo what I have done, which is bring shame, sever that relationship with God. And so I'm trying to get back in the garden by giving God what he gave us, which is this example of killing an animal. And so then, remember, we're having this idea of Eve thinks that Cain is this promised Messiah, this promised person that's going to come and save them and bring them back into the garden. But then God doesn't pick Cain. God picks Abel. And so what does Cain do?
He gets upset.
He gets upset. And God tells him, why are you downcast? Don't you know that if you do what is correct, you'll be accepted? If you don't, sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is for you. But you must overcome it. And so Eve was thinking that Cain was going to be the one that crushed the serpent's head. But here we see that Cain is actually about to give in to the struggle of the snake. Because who's crouching at the door? It's like sin is crouching like a snake at the door, waiting for him to open up so it can get him. God tells him, sin's desire is for you, but you must rule over it.
And whenever I would think about that, you just kind of think, oh yeah, sin is there and it's trying to get you or whatever. But I never really thought about it until today. Sin is, its desire is for you. It's not saying that Cain's desire is for sin.
Yeah.
Sin's desire is for you. And then when I said that, then you got an idea.
Yeah. So then Danielle was saying, when we were talking about this earlier today, that sin's desire is actually for you. That's what it says there. And so what it reminded me of is, again, the Garden of Eden, where the snake comes, and the snake's desire is to take one of the two humans out so that it can replace them, so that it can have dominion. And it's the same here, where it's just the snake's sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is for you, just like the snake's desire was for one of them.
But why was the snake desire for one of them was
to gain dominion?
Yeah.
Exactly. So the snake's desiring to take one of them out and saying, I am a suitable helpmate, right? Go back and listen to the other podcast. I'm a suitable helpmate for the human because I want to also have dominion. And that's what Cain is going to struggle. That's what the struggle with sin here is. It's the snake crouching at the door. Its desire is for you, but you must rule over it.
Right.
So what God is saying is the snake has no dominion over you because the snake is the animal. I have given you dominion over all the animals. You must rule over it. But what's the hidden thing that God is saying there is that it wants to rule over you. So don't let it.
Right.
Rule over it.
Right.
And there we see again the snake's desire to rule over us.
Yes.
And our calling is to rule over it.
Yes.
Just like God gave us dominion over all creatures, he's given us dominion over this desire, over sin. We must make sure that we are dominating it and it's not dominating us.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That we see that there.
Yeah.
So then Cain is in the struggle of, is he going to be the person who his mom thinks he is, or is he going to be the snake? And unfortunately, Cain chooses to be the snake. He takes his brother out to the field, and the Bible said that the snake was the craftiest beast of the field. So he gets taken out to the field. It's almost like the field is the snake's place. And there he plots and he kills his brother. He gives in to that desire and he is ruled basically by the snake. This is what we were talking about. This is another I guess, building block of what we were saying, the kingdom of darkness versus the kingdom of light. Because the kingdom of darkness says there's not enough. God's not good. There's not enough. I have to take.
Yeah.
And this is exactly what Cain says. God's not good. He's not going to pick me. I'm the chosen one. And there's not enough for me. There's not going to be anything for me to do. I have to take it for myself.
I have to get rid of the one who is
Yes.
doing good.
So Cain goes to kill his brother because he thinks, if I get rid of the one that God picked, then he'll have no other option but to pick me. Just like the snake is trying to kill Adam or Eve and say, okay, now I can be the helpmate that I want to be. To have dominion. So it's a crazy parallels though.
Yeah.
And then when we were talking about it today also, I was thinking about how there is also parallels to the story of David.
Oh, yeah.
Where Jonathan takes David to a field. Jonathan tells David, hey, go to that field and hide. If you know the story, Jonathan's dad is Saul, the king of Israel. And Saul wants to kill David. And so Jonathan basically says, David, go hide in the field and I'll talk to my dad. And if basically I can't convince him and he wants to kill you, I'll let you know. And so then Jonathan goes out to the field and he embraces David, and there's this understanding, and they have a covenant together, and Jonathan says something to the effect of, I won't forget our covenant. And so basically Jonathan is saying, I'm not the one. I know David's the one. Here in this parallel story, Jonathan is the older brother, the one who is the chosen, supposed to be the chosen one.
To be king.
Because he's Saul's first son. So he's the heir to the throne of Israel. But that's not what God wants. God wants David to be the king of Israel. And Jonathan gives it up. He doesn't murder David there in the field like Cain murdered his brother. But rather he submits to God's plan and he says, I understand that you're the one. And that's okay. And so it's really cool to me that at least somebody gets it right.
Yeah.
At some point, It's just a cool contrast there. What else?
Well, that God didn't tell him, he wasn't mad at him or anything.
Yeah. I love that part that God accepts Abel's gift, but he talks to Cain. I think that the way we normally read this story, again, we think God is evil. And so we're like, oh, why couldn't God just accept both of their gifts? Like, why has he got to be so mean? And picky. But God isn't like us, It's like, oh, look at what Cain brought. He brought awful stuff. I don't like it. No, he immediately talked to Cain and he said, hey, why are you downcast? Why are you upset? And he tells him, don't you know that if you do good, I'll accept you? God is saying there's enough. There's enough love.
For me to accept you.
Yeah.
I can accept you and him.
Yeah, both of you. Yeah. Very cool point.
And he gives him some good advice.
Yeah, he does. Great advice. Because he tells him what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So that he can do it.
Right.
God is basically saying, I believe in you.
Yeah.
I believe that you can do this.
Right.
Even though God already knows he's not going to do it. And I think that that's also the beautiful part, is that God keeps giving us opportunities.
Yeah.
Like when we get to Eden 2.0, which is the promised land, God already knows that they are going to sin and they're going to be cast out into exile. But he gives them the opportunity.
Right.
Come meet me face to face.
Yeah.
On the mountain. Here's my 10 commandments. Here's my promised land. Here's all the milk and honey. Here's all this great, awesome land. But at the same time, he already knows you're going to mess up. But he doesn't withhold because you're going to mess up.
Right.
And that's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah.
Reminds me of that Bible verse where it says that Jesus was betrayed by his best friend.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, Jesus knew Judas was going to betray him, but in order to fulfill prophecy in Scripture, he had to let him in his heart and have him be his friend.
He didn't hold back.
Yeah, he didn't hold back even though he knew.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Oh, and then the other part that I like is that God shows mercy on him. Because he says, and it's very sad because he says, the punishment is too great for me to bear. I'll be cast out and hidden from your face.
Yeah.
Super sad.
Yeah.
And that brings another point where we have been taught in church about this, total depravity thing. Where like once they ate of that fruit, absolutely everybody that was born after that is born totally depraved, like absolute sinner. And without Jesus, there's nothing right that you can do. And that we don't have any relationship with God, And that's not true because they did have relationship with God. He talked to them. They saw him. They saw him face to face because he says, I'll be hidden from your face. That's what he can't bear, is that I'll be so far away from you that I won't know you anymore. And so they did have a relationship with God even after they ate of the apple.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of questions there about original sin and what we believe about total depravity, if it's real, which I'm not convinced. Yeah, I think that that's very cool. Very sad that he says that. But then God has mercy on him because he says, someone's going to find me and they're going to kill me. And then God says, no, even though you've done this really bad thing and you have to be cast out and you're going to be a wanderer and you're going to be away from my face, I won't have relationship with you anymore. What I'm going to do for you is extend my hand of covering and protection over you.
Yeah.
So even as you go, nobody's going to harm you.
Right.
Isn't that crazy?
Very nice. Well, so they sinned, and Adam and Eve still had a relationship with God because Cain and Abel saw his face. So why now is he not going to see his face anymore?
Because now, yeah, that's a good question. It's a very good question. But it could be just a matter of location. Like, it could be the closer you are to Eden, the closer you are to the source, to God, Further you're away from there, the further you are from God.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's a good question, though. We should think about, wrestle with. Was that it?
This is kind of crazy how it says, the voice of your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. Powerful.
Yeah.
It's like, is this what the Lord hears from all of those that have gone
Yes.
in vain, have gone
innocent?
Yes.
Yes, it is, because you think about the story, when they're being oppressed in Egypt. God says, their cry has come up to me.
Right.
Yeah, God hears the plea of the innocent.
Because the life is in the blood. And that's crazy that God can hear the life in the blood coming up to him.
Yeah. Well, we hope that blesses you.